Good evening. It is now 6:30, so I'd like to call this special meeting of the Safety Services and License Committee meeting to order. And I'd ask Madam Clerk to please take the roll.
Councilwoman Mazzulli,
Present.
Councilman Riley,
Present.
Councilwoman Jermaine, Councilwoman Vargas,
Present.
Councilman Campiano,
Present.
Council Vice President Ferry,
Present.
Council President Paplaskas.
President.
Thank you. And tonight we have two items on the docket. I would like to move the victualling license from second on the docket to first, so that we can get that business owner out of here and proceed with what I assume is going to be the longer part of the meeting. So I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilwoman Mazzulli,
Yes.
Councilman Riley,
Yes.
Councilwoman Vargas,
Yes.
Councilman Campiano,
Yes.
Council Vice President Ferry,
Yes.
Council President Paplaskas.
Yes.
Thank you. So I would ask, is there someone representing La Bandera Bistro for a victualling license here tonight? Hi, could you please come forward? If you want to make sure that's on, you should press it. The green button should stay on. Is there a green light on?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's on now.
Hi, thank you. Could you just give us your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Janelle B. Santos and the business address is 407 Laurel Hill Avenue in Cranston, Rhode Island, 02920.
Thank you very much. Do you understand that your application is not complete?
Yes, I am in the process of completing the application. I am in touch with the clerk's office as well, trying to get everything and all my licenses together. And I should have it in by the end of this week.
Okay, I would ask for counsel.
So, based on the requirements of the approval process, you're missing at a minimum the health department approval, Madam Chair. So my recommendation would be that this be continued to the next safety services meeting until all the approvals have been met.
Thank you, Attorney Angel. So because you don't have the certificate from the health department, it would not be responsible for us to give you a victualling license at this moment. I understand you might be close for renovations right now anyway, okay? So if you could get that taken care of, we can continue this to next meeting. And if you need any help along the way, you can contact the clerk's office or myself.
When would that next meeting be?
The 14th. What, the 14th of? It's the 14th of November.
14th of November? Would it be at the same time?
It should be at the same time, correct?
6:30?
Yep.
Okay.
Or is it 6 o'clock? Rose, is it at 6 o'clock or is it 6:30? 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock?
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, everyone.
You are welcome. And I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to continue to a meeting on the 14th.
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilwoman Mazzulli,
Yes.
Councilman Riley,
Yes.
Councilwoman Vargas,
Yes.
Councilman Campiano,
Yes.
Council Vice President Ferry,
Yes.
Council President Paplaskas.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we have a resolution opposing the establishment of pallet housing villages at the Pastori Center. This is sponsored by Councilman Riley and myself, and I will now have Councilman Riley present the resolution.
Thank you, Chair. So we're here tonight because year after year, we face the same issue when the winter comes. The state has waited until the last minute yet again to attempt to set up temporary or permanent housing for the homeless this winter. Last year, the governor had reached out to us as well, and the mayor and I were able to dissuade him from coming to Cranston. They were attempting to put a shelter in the Citizens Bank building. That was at the time the COVID hospital. Once they went from there, without telling anyone, they set it up at the Nilo Hotel. And overnight, that neighborhood was overtaken. Now, though that's in Warwick, the location does abut Cranston. and specifically my ward. As such, I spoke to numerous residents in the area who reported increase in break-ins, people roaming the streets, and all of it without any notice to them. And this happens year after year, especially in my ward where the Pastore complex is. So this year, a couple of weeks ago, the governor's office reached out and said that they were once again thinking about putting it in Cranston. Now, we've learned year after year what that means, those key terms like exploratory or preliminary, especially when it's 2 weeks before November and the pledge was to have all these put together by the end of November. So we're far past any exploratory phases here. The plan was to put them in the Pastore Center, and that negatively affects the people in my ward. Currently, the Harrington Hall homeless shelter sits in that area. We house 131 men in that. That is the largest shelter in the state, largest men's shelter in the state. So I'm not here tonight to debate state homelessness policy. I am not here to say that Cranston does not want to lend its hand in helping in the state's homelessness problem. I agree there's a crisis. I agree things need to be done, and more needs to be done, far more than waiting to the last minute and throwing some sheds in an open field for these people to live in the winter. And lastly, it's just unacceptable to put it all on Cranston. We already do our fair share. The governor has even said as much. However, the governor, his czar, and anyone else still will not say that we will not put them in Cranston. Cranston is already overburdened. Our fire chief and police chief can speak to the safety services that have to go there and all the tax dollars that have to go to that, for which we receive no reimbursement. So this is something that Cranston already does help. It's time for the other 38 cities and towns to help as well. And if they each did what Cranston already does, then this problem would be well under hand. So coming back to Cranston year after year, because they have that state land, is not the right answer. It hurts Cranston, and they're really not doing anything to help the homeless, but for a month or so. So in addition to that, there's been a lot of talk about, characterizing the homeless population, and we're not doing anything of the sort. There are certain facts that exist. There's a population within the Harrington Hall shelter, a high population of registered sex offenders. Just a few weeks ago at the library I take my 2 young daughters to, a gentleman was arrested for masturbating in wide open public in the middle of the library. We have panhandlers on every corner already in Garden City. We do what we need to do for the homeless. It's time for the state to be proactive for once and actually try to address this issue rather than waiting to the last minute and throwing it here in Cranston. So that's why I've put this resolution together, to send a message to the governor that we already do enough and he's got to look elsewhere for once. And also that our state legislatures take a look at what we in Cranston can do in order to oversee the Pastore complex in some manner. In the last decade, the state has intensified their use there tenfold, and it's getting out of hand, and all the burden falls on Cranston. It's time to spread that burden to all the other 38 cities and towns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Riley. Attorney Angel, before I allow the administration to speak and public safety, do we need to take a motion now? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve? Second.
Okay. Now for discussion, is there anyone from the administration who would like to take the opportunity to speak before I open this up for the public?
Good evening, everyone. This began when the representative of the governor's office and Director Saul had a call with the administration 2 or 3 weeks ago. And just to put in proper perspective, at that time, the governor's office was soliciting input from what the administration, what the mayor would perceive as should, in the event that pallet housing or any other form of homeless shelters be placed at the Pastore Center, how would the mayor feel? How does he feel that the residents would feel and what the impact is on the city of Cranston? So I think it was presented to the city in a very positive way in that respect, soliciting input. I know the governor and the mayor have a very strong working relationship, and I think there was that respect that came through that that the governor was soliciting that input. And very cordial discussion. Director Saul, actually, we made mention that he's basically doing God's work, that what he's doing is tremendous work and he's doing a wonderful job, and he's extremely well respected. The issue that really was brought out to the feedback that was provided to the governor's office was that the issue of just the housing of additional units in and of itself was not the overall overriding concern. It was kind of at the tipping point, the mayor believes, in the city of Cranston, where we're housing the prisons, the state prisons, the women's, the men's, the youth. Certainly we have many of the state facilities. Certainly we have the the homeless shelter as mentioned at the Harrington Hall, which we're all well familiar with in terms of the events that have occurred from many of the residents over the years that are concerning to the city. So in and of itself, the mayor isn't resisting. If that was the only issue, the mayor wouldn't be resisting taking responsibility for the additional residents that may be placed in the city. But more importantly, in the totality and the burden that Cranston bears from the entire facility. After I speak, certainly we have Chief Warren from the fire department, and we have Colonel Winquist from the police department, who are willing to take your questions and provide any input from their experiences. They're in a better position from a public safety perspective to express the experiences in the city of Cranston than I. So these gentlemen are afforded to you, and I suggest you seek their input from their expertise and experiences. But there really is an infrastructural burden that this may be placing on the city of Cranston. As I mentioned, those foregoing facilities that the city of Cranston supports. And as the councilman just illustrated, it's not just the burden in terms of responses that our police department and our fire department have to respond to in terms of supporting that facility. It infiltrates beyond the facility, beyond the compound of the Pastore Center, into the neighborhoods and into the affecting the people and the businesses in the nearby area. And I think these gentlemen are better positioned to express that than I. Speaking with the fire chief, I was actually a bit astounded that probably if we do the math, Cranston supports the Pastore Center in totality with probably the equivalent of one full rescue. That alone is probably a burden of over $1 million on the taxpayers of the city of Cranston that Cranston is supporting. So when you add up the number of runs, there's been hundreds of runs annually by the fire department, and just to Harrington Hall alone, in terms of police runs and fire runs, it could be in the hundreds. So there's the concern for that. The other day, we were kind of appreciative to hear, and the governor, it was actually quoted, I believe, with Steve Clampkin of WPRO, when asked the question about having these facilities potentially be in the city of Cranston, that the governor appears supportive of what the mayor advises. He said, the mayor, I can almost quote the governor in saying that he feels that Cranston has done its part already, which was wonderful news we hear. We feel the governor hears that. And then he also said that he wouldn't do anything without the mayor's buy-in to this. So I think just want to demonstrate that we believe that respect is there. And certainly we trust that the governor will hold to his word in his appreciation, understanding of the totality of where this issue stands in relationship to Cranston's support, both from police, fire, and the residents and businesses. And that's pretty much where the administration's position is. And I just wanted to make sure we clarify that we did receive an inquiry in terms of, it wasn't a direct proposal, but it was, but soliciting feedback as to how the mayor perceived, how he felt, how he believed that the residents would feel about such a proposal, should one come about. So I wanted to just make sure we put that in perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Moretti. Who's here from fire and police? Who I would like to speak? Is it Chief Warren?
James Warren, 136 Longview Drive, the fire chief. So the administration just wanted me to get some run numbers for the last 5 years. I can give them to everybody. So 2018, we did 307. 2019, 253. 2020, 209. 2021, 230. And as of the beginning of October, I think it was October 4th, 238 this year. That's strictly just to 30 Howard Avenue. That's both fire and rescue runs. But as I've told the mayor, that rescue response throughout Garden City, Glen Hills, Oak Lawn Avenue, at all the bus stops. We have a lot of overdoses. One of the highest overdoses is in that general area for Cranston. It is a very busy truck. It does make a lot of runs to that area. Behind Dunkin' Donuts on Sakanas, it's another place we do a lot of runs. So it does tie up those trucks quite a bit, especially the rescue. It really does, bringing other rescues in. So I just want to make that point clear. I don't know how the housing is. We tried to look into it. I don't know if they have heat, electricity, or it's just a small house. So for us, fire potential, I don't think it's gonna be too bad unless there is electricity. We'd be concerned about candles, we'd be very concerned about. And that's one thing we are concerned about. But I feel like we can handle it if we have to. We will do it. But the rescue runs, I believe, will increase. That's one thing we're concerned about. Any other questions or?
Do we get reimbursed from the state any money at all for rescue runs?
No, we try to bill, but we usually do not get money. We do get pilot money from the state. I'm not sure what that revenue is.
Do you know what the pilot money is that the state does give us?
The pilot money is not based on rescue runs. It's
No.
based on real estate.
But do you know that amount?
No, I don't have it handy.
Thank you.
Yes.
Chair, I have a question for Chief Warren. Chief, do you have the numbers for all of the rescue runs or fire runs that we do throughout the entire complex? Because,
I do
looking at
not.
these, one of them was 307, so that's almost one a day. Through
Yeah, that
all
was
the
in
seasons.
2018. That was busy.
Just because I know I drive through on the way to work and I see rescues at minimum. I've seen rescues at the hospital. I've seen rescues at the DMV. I've seen rescues at other buildings. So I'm curious
I
about
don't
the
have those
burden the
numbers.
entire complex takes.
I do not have the numbers for the entire complex.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Chief Warren, I would just ask that if this does go forward, if you could, there were some fires in California at pallet shelters. I know that was before that they changed the material that they're made from, but I'm assuming there should be some spacing issues. I don't believe that we do any of the code work at the state facility. It comes under
Up
a
to the state
sta-
fire marshal.
A
we
state fire
understand.
marshal.
Yeah.
So that is a concern that I would hope that we could get the information
Yeah,
for.
they'll follow the fire code. That's a big, if they put it right next to 30 Hot Hour, there's a large tract of land there. It's very large, so I don't think spacing would be a problem.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
All right.
And from police?
Good evening. First off, I want to say we're not against the homeless population. There's a lot of good people that are finding themselves living in tents in the woods across Cranston or in Harrington Hall. But we know that there's a segment of that population that is drug addicted or alcohol dependent. And we come across those people on a daily basis. I was actually out at a homeless encampment recently, and the individuals I spoke to did not want to go to any type of shelter because when you go to Harrington Hall, you're searched before you go in, not allowed to bring weapons, alcohol, or be under the influence when you're going to the shelter. So we find a lot of people prefer to be in that position rather than be monitored, if you will. Harrington Hall, as mentioned, has about 150 beds or so. But out of those, there's at least on any given night, 30 sex offenders that make that their home, if you will. And they're allowed to come in at a certain time at night, and they're forced to leave in the morning. And most of them get on a bus and they head into Kennedy Plaza, or they end up in Providence. And then others we find are out panhandling, as mentioned, involved in some activities that are illegal. But for the most part, we have it pretty much under control. But out of those 33 plus sex offenders a night, 10 of them are at a level 3 sex offender, which is the highest risk assessment that you can have. So we spend a lot of time making sure they're in compliance. And of course, there's a threat to the community that we want to make sure that we're monitoring that activity pretty closely. There's 17 individuals incarcerated right now at the ACI who are going to be registered sex offenders when they are released. And what usually happens is those people that are released go literally from wherever they're being housed or incarcerated right to Harrington Hall. So that number of 30 could jump to 47, depending on the release dates that are coming up. My concern is we don't have a lot of information about these pallet shelters or the population that's going to be there. Some of the questions I have is how many are we talking about? Are they going to be identified when you go into Harrington Hall? You have to, sign and register, if you will. We kind of know who's in and out of that location. We know a little bit about their backgrounds. These pallet shelters are going to have the same rules. Is anybody going to monitor if they can have alcohol or drugs or weapons inside these pallet shelters as they check Harrington Hall? Are the same rules going to be in place? My understanding, there's no bathrooms or running water in these pallet shelters. Where they're going to go to shower or use the restroom facilities. My concern is they're going to end up, at local businesses, or as they've seen in Warwick, using those businesses as a shower or to loiter at these places of business. Is there going to be services for these people? A lot of these people are drug dependent, or they have mental health or psychological issues that's why they usually take the bus to Providence to hopefully get the services that they need. Is there going to be an increase of state police presence on the grounds? When I first became a trooper back in 1990, we had a Howard car, which would patrol the Howard complex. So every 4 hours, each barracks would take their turn and they would have a dedicated presence on the grounds. At some point in time, that car went away, but I would hope and implore, if this pallet shelter idea comes through, that the state police would come and have some type of presence at that location. As the fire chief mentioned, we do dedicate a lot of police services, public safety services at Harrington Hall and across the complex. Last year, we responded to 132 calls for service, mostly at Harrington Hall. Each time we check a sex offender at that location, it is a number that we draw. So some of those will be specifically sex offender compliance checks. This year, we've been there 64 calls for service. A lot of the calls, we get that stem from Harrington Hall, involve public drunkenness in the neighborhoods and aggressive panhandling. So we are responding to calls beyond the calls for service that I just mentioned. And we do get those cases that was mentioned about the library incident. There have been limited incidences such as that, but obviously quite concerning that we're having to deal with that. I did speak to my counterparts at the Warwick Police Department specifically about the Nilo Hotel and when they had moved in a pretty significant population of homeless people. And the large majority of the people there were families and weren't a problem whatsoever. But within that population, there was a group that had committed quite a few crimes in the neighborhood. There was a significant spike in crime, car breaks, shoplifting, Warwick Mall, local businesses, loitering, aggressive panhandling. That happened at local businesses, playgrounds, other locations across the city that were linked directly back to the population that had moved into the Nilo. My understanding is the state did not place any sex offenders within the Nilo population, and that's because of families, obviously, that will be placed there. And that's another question I have is if sex offenders are going to be housed there, they're going to be closer to the neighborhoods, so on and so forth. So we do have our concerns. I do think there needs to be some type of solution. We do have probably the highest population of dangerous sex offenders in the state besides Providence. And that would be my concern, that more sex offenders would be placed in these particular pallet shelters. But from a public safety standpoint, if it had to happen, of course, we'll handle whatever comes our way. But, we need more information. We just don't have enough to really give a really good public safety assessment of the situation that would occur. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Are there any questions from the committee? For the Colonel? I have a question. I know we don't have any real details to know about any kind of security plan, but if there are, these are almost like people's private homes, they have a key. If there is some kind of a curfew, do you anticipate we might need detail there at night? Because it's a lot easier to come in and out of your own home than it is to leave a larger congregate facility.
Well, it would depend on the size of this population that's going to be there. Again, I could see a lot of calls for service potentially coming there, and we're going to drain resources from other parts of the city. We're limited on the number of cars we have throughout the city, and we just don't want to tie those cars up so we can't adequately patrol the rest of the city. So that would be a concern. Again, would that fall on the state police or the Cranston Police Department? Who's going to pay for that detail? And again, it's hard for us to fill details as well. So that's another concern, even if we had the funding for it, to have these officers work, beyond their shift, if it's on an overtime basis or whatever it may be. But it would definitely be a strain, I believe, on resources. And fentanyl is prevalent in our city, like the fire chief had mentioned. We're responding to a lot of these overdoses, and that's a major concern too. More drugs in the city and more calls for service is what I'm concerned about.
Thank you. I
welcome.
appreciate your time. No more questions? Okay. So right now I will open up a public comment. Are several people here present in the audience? And it looks to me like there's a lot of people on Zoom. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to take the people who are present first. Everyone will have 3 minutes. I have an extra iPad that I'm going to time on, and it will, make a little song when your time is up. I would ask that you be respectful of everyone's time, and that we try to stay on topic here. This is about the resolution. I know it can go off in various directions and can't really stop you, but we're not going to get anywhere if we don't all kind of stay on the same page. Okay, and if you continue to talk past the timer going off, I'm just going to kind of wave at you. I don't want anyone to think I'm being rude, but I don't want to make it unfair for everyone else who has to speak. Okay, go right ahead. And when you come up, please make sure you say your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Al Turner Jr. I live at 70 Warwick Avenue in Cranston, 02905. I am a homeless advocate. When the governor became governor a year and a half ago, he asked me to be the head of his homeless transition team. What I do now is I work for Pony. It's preventing overdose and naloxone intervention. I train and distribute Narcan. But back to the point here, I am concerned. I mean, I live in Cranston. I think other municipalities should take on some of the responsibility. It's not really a burden, it's a responsibility. I think we have to the citizens of this state that are living outside, that have nowhere to go, that have mental health issues, they have substance use issues, as we all know. These are illnesses. You know, these are illnesses. These people are sick. They need help. Harrington Hall, you know, I've done a lot of things. I'm still working with the governor. I helped him. We talked about giving $5 million last year to put folks in hotels, which we did. And the chief spoke about the Nilo. But they had, when Crossroads ran the Nilo Hotel, there were a lot of problems. When the Amos House ran the hotel, there were hardly any problems. You know, so Crossroads is not one of my favorite organizations at all. I've come a long way. I will tell you, I was homeless myself in 2016 for a year. I chose to be there. I could have gotten an apartment, but I chose to be there to help these folks because I saw what was going on in the shelter. And I saw what Crossroads was doing to these folks. So I became an advocate, and I still do. I'm also an outreach person. I'm out in Kennedy Plaza almost every day throughout Providence, giving people Narcan. I talk to people with mental health issues. I talk to people about substance use because I've been through all of that. I have been there. If you name it, I've done it. And I understand, you know, but I think the other municipalities need to take a little responsibility and kind of spread this out. But the issue is, you know, the communities. A lot of people don't want sober houses. They don't want homeless shelters. They don't want group homes, even group homes. They don't want in their communities. So it's very difficult logistically to figure this out. It really, really is. But I'm telling you, I just want to say these folks really need help. You know, they really need help. I mean, there are sex offender houses all through the state. So if Harrington Hall comes up to a capacity, whatever it is right now, I know when Nick Mattiello, when he was the Speaker of the House, he wanted it to be, I think it was like 10% or something. Since then, it's gone over that. Also, the reason why we have, just one more thing. Also, the reason that we have more people homeless is because they're being evicted from their apartments because the landlords are raising the rents. And because naturally they have to pay for gas, they have to pay for their oil, they have things to pay for. So these people are being evicted. I deal with it every day. They're being evicted and thrown on the street, but we need to find a place to put these folks. And we will have a wraparound team. If they do come here, I don't know what's going to happen, but wherever they go, we're going to have a wraparound team to help them deal with all the issues that they have. And we are going to help these people to transition into housing, which the governor's put $32 million aside for just the homeless. So thank you for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Next speaker, just get right up.
Hi, my name is Danielle Barbusi, 56 Tweed Street in Cranston. So I have a couple of questions. I agree with the temperature of everybody's thoughts that this is not an attack on the homeless. And, you know, that it's a bigger problem, I think, than housing them just for a couple of months, which was mentioned. But when you say there was 64 runs to Harrington, is that one car? How many cars show up when you have a call for service by the police department?
I'm sorry, the public cannot directly ask
Oh,
questions to the
okay.
administration, but we can
Okay.
get that answer
Okay,
for
so
you.
I guess
Okay.
my question is trying to understand all of this. I think the representative from the fire department said 138. That's one ambulance. I mean, when you're a resident in the city, do you still pay for an ambulance run to your house? So again, this is a cost spreading the problem across the state, the other communities, and I agree that we do our fair share. Not to attack the problems that we have, but my question would be, the 64 runs, is that one police car or is that a whole team of police officers? So how many resources are really being used? And regarding the runs to the prison, I think we're stretched. And I drive Saconaset into London every day, and I'm stopped on a daily basis to be asked for money. And, I can't lie. Sometimes I feel bad. I mean, I give it, and sometimes I don't, because sometimes it's a little too aggressive. So I appreciate your time, and I just am, interested in more to come. And finally, again, it's just, we have too much going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Barrera. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness. And I have worked doing street outreach and point in time counts here in Cranston as well. So I am so glad to hear your concern when you shared your concern about your daughters, because the issue at hand here is someone's daughter and someone's sons who don't have a place to live tonight. In Rhode Island tonight, 425 people are experiencing homelessness. So we are all going to go home tonight to our warm beds and our warm houses. 425 people do not have a bed to lay down in tonight. That's the crux of this issue. I understand that there's a concern about the municipality of Cranston, but I run the database for the state that collects all of the data on folks that are experiencing homelessness. Cranston is part of Providence County. Providence County has 74% of all of the folks that are homeless, and I do have some handouts here. So the representation in Providence County of people experiencing homelessness is 74%. Of that, the second highest to Providence number of people experiencing homelessness is in Cranston, and that is 10% of the totality of the folks in Providence County. That represents currently 63 households. And so when we look at where to set up shelters for folks, firstly, we don't want to set up shelters. We want to house people, but COVID has created this situation where the numbers of people experiencing homelessness have grown. They have quadrupled since COVID began, and we need immediate answers because the winter weather is coming and people are going to die. People are going to die if we do not have a warm place for them to be. Rapidly deployable shelters do have heat, and they are a safe option that a lot of communities across the nation are using at this point. I want to point out a few other things. Harrington Hall does not have 150 beds. They don't have 131 beds. They have 112 beds. So I want to also make sure, as you all are presenting information, that we have an opportunity to make sure that we're presenting accurate information. Some of the information regarding the police and fire calls, I think would be, it would behoove you to look into the details around those calls, because the actual physical site of Harrington Hall is a state-owned property, which the state-owned fire system also malfunctioned. So I think some of the calls are related to the physical site that is state property and being kept up by the state. Other things that I think are really important is these are not sheds. These are houses that can be deployed rapidly, that folks can stay in until they seek housing, and they can be taken down as soon as the need is no longer. They can be taken down and put away for another day. I think what's important is when we talk about fentanyl and overdose, the numbers of people with overdose and substance use issues in the state has risen over COVID, not just in our population, across the entire state, the whole population. All of our neighbors are experiencing higher levels of substance use. I want to make sure to also point out there's an overrepresentation in Cranston of single or individual adults and couples that are homeless as compared to other areas in all of the other municipalities, with the exception of Providence. There's no direct correlation of the folks that we are counting that are experiencing homelessness in Cranston to the ACI. These are folks who are either from Cranston or have come to Cranston and are experiencing homelessness. It's not helpful to try to understand, like, are these people from Cranston? Because they're transient. They are going to places where there are either services or where they're from, and they have other supports. I think what's also helpful is to understand that we have to address the issues that are in your backyard. I think when you talk about police calls, I think when you look at any population, the number of police or fire calls that you're going to get for any population, whether they're housed in a rapidly deployable shelter or they're outside in a tent or an encampment, the number of calls are going to be the same. I think you're going to see a decrease in the number of calls.
Ma'am?
Yes?
I don't want to interrupt you, but I've let you go over like a minute
Oh, I'm sorry.
of time.
Okay.
Mm.
In conclusion, I just would like for you to consider, rather than a resolution just prohibiting this, that you have a workshop to understand the data and understand the actuality of what this potential project would bring to the city of Cranston. Thank you.
I would ask that we try to stick to time best we can, okay? Thank you.
Hi, Pat Cordelissa, 160 Oak Lawn Avenue, Cranston, Rhode Island. I support the resolution. We owe it to the residents of the city of Cranston to provide them quality life and a standard of living. That's a premium that we have to offer the residents of Cranston. Social ills are unfortunate, but that's a state issue that has to be dealt with on that level with the funds and with the health department. But right now, I would say that the residents of our city need us to support them. They're number one, and we have to keep that in consideration for any of these type of projects in our city. With the prisons and the Harrington Hall, I think the city of Cranston has done enough. It's time for other communities to take over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christina Brown. I'm a Cranston resident. I live at 217 Armington Street. Thank you all for having me this evening. I'm here to ask you to oppose this resolution. At the very least, do what has already been recommended to put it aside and workshop it to make sure the language is correct and accurate to represent the situation at hand. I think all the concerns that are raised tonight are very valid, and certainly safety of Cranston residents is important to our city and all wards. But the conversation was a conversation, as Director Moretti has already said, a preliminary conversation with the state. And I would hope that our leaders in Cranston would be compassionate to this issue of our neighbors suffering, and certainly Cranston residents suffering displacement every day due to the pandemic and economic vitality of the moment at hand, and would sit in meaningful partnership with the state and address these issues and work with them to try to house our neighbors who are suffering right now. I feel like the resolution is a little early in the conversation, as the state is just working on their planning. And whether or not the pallets are sited in Cranston, I would hope that our leaders would work with the state to find a solution to house our neighbors over the winter. In addition to that, I find the language of the resolution conflating our neighbors who are dealing with homelessness right now with the sex offender population to be offensive and inaccurate, as has been previously said. So I want to respect everybody's time and know that there's many people to speak. I've submitted a letter. I work in public policy. I'm happy to work with any of you as a resident on this issue and working with the state. Thank you very much.
To the chair, what was your name again, ma'am?
Christina Brown.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Harrison Tuttle. I live at 131 Belmont Road in Cranston. I'm testifying today because as someone who has been unhoused, someone who was raised by a single mother on a fixed income, I know exactly what it's like to not know where I'm going to sleep that night. This kid who grew up, didn't really face any issues, went to Bishop Hendricken High School. My grandmother was the chairwoman of the Cranston Zoning Board, really wasn't a person that anyone would imagine to be unhoused. And, you know, thankfully, we never had a situation in which we had to go to one of these shelters. But the reality is that when we look at people who are unhoused, we have to look at why they're being unhoused. And the fact that we have not built any housing that has been affordable in over 10 years is certainly an area of concern. I want to respect Councilman Rizzuli's comment about keeping it within this resolution, but that is very important. When we fall behind what it requires to have affordable housing, we're not able to keep up with the amount of people that are being sheltered here at Harrington Hall, right? We've got a situation in which poverty leads to crime and crime leads to addiction. And that's how people feel. And that's how they get by when they're dealing with mental health issues. And so as other testifiers have said, I think I'm here. There are certainly other folks on both aisles here that want to solve this situation, but I believe that it takes both sides that understand that the people that are in Harrington Hall, the people who are unhoused that will continue to rise in the state are not going to stop just because, we haven't had enough municipality support across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Rahul Benjani. I'm a primary care and addiction medicine physician. I live at 60 Sefton Drive in Cranston, Rhode Island. I'm married to Catherine Trimber, who was born and raised in Cranston, Rhode Island. We live right behind her parents at 47 Strathmore. Spent the last 40 years in Cranston, Rhode Island. And I'm here today because for the past 5 years, I've worked as a primary care physician overseeing the state's transitions clinic. So every medically complex individual coming out of the ACI comes to see me and a group of community health workers in clinic. And so I probably take care of more people with histories of sex offenses than any other physician in the state. I also take care of a large swath of the homeless population. Every Wednesday night, I go on street outreach, and I was the head of the state's quarantine and isolation facility. I also provided medical care to the folks at the NILO, and I work at Crossroads in the medical respite downstairs that houses 6 people, a program that was started by Lifespan's president a year ago. My experience working with people experiencing homelessness has been that they are some of the most special and kind people that I've ever interfaced with. And it's really caused me or helped me to break down some of the stereotypes that I had growing up about individuals experiencing homelessness. When they come into my clinic or when I see them on the street, I'm able to learn intimately about their lives. As you know, the patient-physician relationship is incredibly special because we're privileged to all of this information about people, and the extent to which a number of people have experienced trauma and other types of violence is mind-blowing. And the way in which people are resilient and able to overcome some of those traumas is really admirable. And so I have a lot of respect for my patients experiencing homelessness. And I especially have respect for the fact that many of them can endure living in shelters. You know, shelters like Crossroads, Harrington Hall, Emmanuel House, the Woonsocket Family Shelter, I mean, you name it, the Providence Rescue Mission, these places are incredibly tough to live in. I mean, I'd love for the audience behind me to raise their hands if they've ever been to any of these shelters to look at the conditions. And so this idea that up to 30 individuals could be housed in our city in pallets that do in fact have electricity and heating, and that would have robust case management, means that perhaps 30 people from some of these shelters could come and live in a more dignified way in these pallets. I think that one other way to approach this is to not think about this in black or white terms, in terms of like, do we oppose it or do we agree with the resolution? But rather think about what leads to a high quality program, right? Someone previously had talked about, like what happened when the NILA was run by Amos House versus Crossroads. And so what about thinking about a resolution where we as a city demand that there be high level case management and certain services put in place? So if there are 30 of these immediately deployable homes, then perhaps we say that the ratio of case managers to residents should be, 1 to 5 or 1 to 7, that these are all the services that should be offered. That's the way we can guarantee that the number of rescues called to the area will be decreased, that the number of people who are successfully housed will be increased. And so I would just recommend that we be a little bit more nuanced about the way in which we're thinking about taking care of people.
Thank you.
Just through the chair, real quick,
Yes.
I just wanted to provide some clarity in case there's any confusion on this issue. This body has no control whatsoever on state homelessness policy. Even if we wanted to do a workshop, it's useless. They decide that. The reason we're here and the resolution is whether or not we're just going to allow the state to put them in Cranston as their last resort. Whatever their policy is, I would love to sit down to do that. I've experienced homelessness myself. I'm not going to get into it, but the policies, I am more than happy to sit and talk with anybody about it. We just don't have that authority. We would love to do that, but I just wanted to let everyone know because they were making suggestions about us doing some type of workshop.
Thank you.
David Baldwin, 67 Fordson Avenue in Cranston. And I don't put myself forward as an expert in anything to do with homeless policy, although I do know that it's a population that needs two things, housing and services. But I want to add my voice to those who are suggesting that this resolution is premature because it's counting backwards. That was a very short 3 minutes. Because it just condenses the whole discussion into a choice between either accepting whatever the state does, which is apparently what we have to do anyway, or no, we're not doing anything. We refuse to do anything or anything more. And that seems, as the gentleman said, the doctor said, a little less nuanced than we could be. And what I would ask the council to do is not put up a resolution that presents one side and make it a debate and a contest, but talk about it. You've got a lot of knowledgeable people here to provide input from all sides and come up with a resolution that represents that consensus. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Buchanan. I live at 163 Garden Hills Drive in Cranston, virtually right across the street from the corrections facilities. Somebody mentioned what a shed was tonight, so I decided to look it up, and this is from the American Heritage Dictionary. 1, a small structure, either freestanding or attached to a larger structure, serving for storage or shelter. Now, I have to commend the people that are working with these homeless people. It's a very difficult job. I certainly wouldn't want to do it. They should be highly commended. However, the problem here is that a shed city is not going to cut it either for the people that are homeless or the people of Cranston, the residents like myself who live very, very close to this facility. Apparently, funding for this is going to be a major issue. Where these people are put is a major issue. But right now, because it seems like this is a shortcut, look at San Francisco, look at Los Angeles, look at the problems they're having with crime from homeless people. You can't even walk the streets in San Francisco, it's so bad. Now, I'm not going to compare this exactly to San Francisco, but we're setting ourselves up for a possible catastrophe, especially with the crime rate. How many times did my wife and I get a call from the police department saying there is a level 3 sex offender living in your neighborhood? I mean, come on. I mean, this needs to stop. The people of Cranston want to be safe. The people that are homeless need to be taken care of properly. And this isn't cutting it on either side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dwayne Klinker. I'm the pastor of Matthews Street United Methodist Church. I'm a resident of Cranston with my wife, kids, grandkids, longtime resident down in Eden Park. Every Sunday morning, I have breakfast with about 200 unhoused people, mostly unhoused. I find myself having breakfast with human beings. We have one fabric in our city or our state or our nation, and that is a fabric of mutuality. I wear this collar. I know I talk kind of in those kind of philosophic terms sometimes, but I wear the collar of a person who was unhoused 2,000 years ago or so. I'm loyal to that. See, we don't have anything if we don't have each other. We don't have anything. We don't have any mutuality. We don't have any connectionality. We don't have any schools. We don't have any hospitals. We don't have any houses in any kind of communities that are decent. So I do think this is about our safety because if we don't start addressing the situation of housing, we're not safe in our precious little single family houses in Cranston like mine. Really, do we think that this won't visit our children or our grandchildren? I don't think we can be sure of that. Or maybe that it hasn't already visited us, apparently. I don't think we can be sure of that. Corporations now are buying major sections of some major cities, the housing, not renting it, not selling it, just to speculate in the value of it. You know what's happening to our housing prices. You know what's going on. And people are being thrown out of their apartments every day. I got a call before I came here from a brother from the United Food and Commercial Workers, like somebody being thrown out with a kid. I'm telling you, it changes you when you see the children. When you see a child, a family with a child coming in for the free breakfast at Matthewson Street, it changes you. And you realize we got to have some solutions. So I agree with my neighbors who say, a little too soon for this, a little too uptight. Maybe though, we could have a conversation and be proud to be a part of some solutions. These tiny houses, they call them, these shed houses made out of metal. Don't burn, I guess, but there's 325 acres at the Pasteur complex. And there's not even a proposal on the table for these 30 tiny houses. And it means somebody's not in a tent or literally in a doorway. So I think we should do something together because at the end, solidarity is all we have, really. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Mary English. I live at 24 Garden Hills Parkway. I'm right next to the Army National Guard. I couldn't be any closer to this. I've lived in my home for 30 years. I'm proud of my home. My husband ran the CLCF Girls Cranston League for several years. He's found homeless people in the bushes there, which is a scary situation when you have all these little girls over there. Like I said, I support everything that you said, Councilman Riley. I support everything that the chief of police said and the fire chief. It's not a case of I don't have compassion for those that are homeless, but I also feel like Cranston has bared a lot of the burden of prisons. And I feel like I'm almost being made to feel guilty if I'm not willing to house these people. But I also have a home that I hope that the value of my home someday, if I ever want to sell it, is that selfish of me to say? Yeah, maybe. But it is a concern of mine, and I raised my daughter here. She wants to live in Cranston someday. She's living in an apartment. She's lucky enough to have an apartment. As I said, I'm compassionate for these homeless people, but I do think that we've bared a lot of the burden already, when I'm from Chicago originally, like I said, I moved here 30 years ago, and I said to my husband, whatever we do, I just don't want to live near the prisons, and I couldn't be any closer now, And yes, there've been people that have broken out of the prison and they've come to the house and they interviewed us, and but I'm still there, I do love my community. But I do think it's time for somebody else to take some of this burden away. So I want you to know that I do support the resolution. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Luisa Duvidio. I live at 40 Midland Drive in Cranston. And I've lived in Cranston for the better part of the last 3 decades. My great-grandmother bought my house, my property, in 1956, and 4 generations of my family have lived there ever since. I love my neighborhood. I love my community here. And I think I'm very, very lucky and fortunate to have grown up in the city. I wanted to speak today in opposition of the resolution and echo what a lot of people on either side of this resolution have already said tonight. These folks who are unhoused and are in crisis are already living in our community. And just because you refuse to see them or acknowledge them doesn't mean they go away. Cranston is where they sleep at night. Cranston is where they access services. It's where they go to work. It's where their friends live. And providing community members with a safer, drier, warmer place to sleep in the winter is truly the least we could be doing for our neighbors who are in crisis. It's been very disheartening to hear multiple people talk about the burden that these individuals will be on our community. I think that it's very callous and short-sighted to reduce an individual down to the economic value that their life is supposed to bring us. I believe myself and many of my neighbors understand the inherent value that a human life has, that every person has, regardless of their housing status. And I know if given the chance, our community would choose to help a neighbor rather than just look away. I just wanted to add quickly a small statistic. Again, when we're talking about this as not a be-all end-all solution, but a small step in the very complicated process of solving the homelessness crisis, 90% of people who are housed are able to stabilize their lives and never return to homelessness again. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about individuals who would maybe possibly be taking up residence in these temporary housing units. Thank you.
Hi, Frank DeAngelis, 12 Garden Hills Parkway. And I have to say that I support this resolution. We've lived there for over 6 years. At times, when Harrington Hall gets out, it's unsafe to go to Brayton Park. My wife and I won't even walk through the park at night because they're living in the woods. They're living in the stairwell of the concession stand. I have young children. I get at least 1 to 2 calls every couple of weeks about registered sex offenders at Harrington Hall. I'm not going to disagree that there's not a homeless problem in the state or in the country, but I just don't believe it should be Cranston's problem to take on more of these homeless shelters or sheds or what they might be in that Harrington Hall area. I think, you know, we all drive through there every day and we see what goes on. You know, you're at the red lights on New London Avenue and in the summertime have to put up your windows because they're aggressively panhandling, literally coming up and knocking on your window. It's happened several times. It's happened to my wife this summer. There's a serious problem and I don't know what I don't know how to fix it. But I just don't think we should be promoting it by bringing more into the city of Cranston. Like you said, Councilman, there's a lot of other cities that could step up and help. I think Cranston has already done their fair share in trying to help the homeless. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in chambers who wishes to speak?
Good evening. Michael Favicchio, 153 Belvedere Drive. I thought I'd speak briefly on this only because it was the hot button topic for the entire 10 years that I served on the council in Councilman Riley's area. So he knows full well what it's all about. The big issue for the 10 years I was there was Harrington Hall and the sex offenders. It's still a problem. It's been there forever. I know the police department has always had a full-time person monitoring those people. I think the issue is a statewide issue. I think the state should have a comprehensive plan, but I don't think Cranston should bear the entire burden. I worry about having families perhaps on those grounds where you have 30, 40 sex offenders on any given night. There's some issues. And that's not going to go away all that easy. I think the homeless problem is probably much larger than 30 or 40 units. And every city has a problem, but I don't think it's fair to burden just Cranston. I think before the state jumps into this, they should really come up with a plan. They should examine the impact on every city, especially the fiscal impact, because we have to implement and use our resources for fire, emergency calls, and it's a burden. It's a financial burden, and we don't get the proper pilot money, I don't think, for that kind of thing. So I know it's convenient because the IMH is right here, state property. There's plenty of land there, but I question whether you should even consider putting families near Harrington Hall, where you have sex offenders. I haven't been able to research whether there's a prohibition against that, but I know that having them in the same area, I don't believe is a good thing. Even when we had the panhandling issue, so-called, a number of years ago, there were some homeless men that testified before the council. And the amazing thing was that the non-sex offenders segregated themselves from the sex offenders within Harrington Hall. So there were problems even within that institution itself. So I would just caution, I would think that the state should consider really examining this at length, because the problem, as we know, is that we can't force people to help themselves. Those with an economic issue, they can usually get out of that situation with some help. But the rest of the people, you have a lot of mental illness, you have alcohol and drug abuse. And because of our civil liberties, you can't just force people to get help. You can't lock them up or force them to get some medical help. So I think before the state jumps into this, I really think that you should urge them to come up with a very comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in chambers who would like to speak on this matter? No? Okay, I will start with Zoom.
Pauline DeRosa.
Hi, Pauline. I'm just going to ask that you give us your full name and your address, and then you have 3 minutes. I don't want to interrupt you while you're speaking, so if you could have a little timer on your phone or something, that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Pauline DeRosa. I live at 97 Cypress Drive, and I'm the founder of Garden City Alliance. I am addressing the only resolution on the agenda this evening with reference to the potential for a pallet housing village at the Pastore Center. We are told there are as many as 1,000 homeless individuals in the state of Rhode Island, with some families living in their cars or in parking lots. We already know there is a chronic homeless problem in our city, but there are those individuals who may have come into hard times or have made poor decisions. With that said, there are many lingering questions before any consideration is taken to install these pallet homes. I would just like to list a few. Will these buildings be used only in the wintertime? If so, are there alternative locations available during the warmer months, or will individuals be diverted to other shelters? Who decides which individuals would be selected to live in these shelters? Or is it a first come, first served situation? Or is there an application process? I'm just not familiar with how this works. We are also hearing of an increase in the loss of housing in the senior citizen population. Will they be included among these individuals since there seems to be no senior housing available in Cranston? Will the state allow overflow from other cities and towns? Who is responsible for the maintenance and inspection of these shelters to see that they are kept in order for the next person that may occupy them? We are hopeful there will be a security presence on site. If there are a substantial number of these units, will there also be a go-to person on site if there are questions and/or concerns posed by those living on the premises? Who would be responsible for snow plowing, the city or the state? Will there be the same time limits as those imposed at Harrington Hall, in by 5 p.m. and out by 7 a.m.? These are just a few of the questions that need to be posed to Governor McKee and his Rhode Island housing czar, Mr. Saul, well in advance of any indication of a homeless village being installed at the Pastore Center. As Councilman Riley has stated, the city of Cranston can do better for its existing homeless population, but pallet houses are not the answer. We need secure housing for these individuals. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jay Bombardier Jr.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jay Bombardier Jr., live at 41 Oak Street in Cranston. Now, give you a little backdrop of my story here. I heard someone earlier ask anybody in the audience if they've ever been to one of these shelters. For the last 12 years, my family and I have actually worked in a lot of these shelters across the whole Northern East. From Philadelphia up to Boston, we take time out of our schedule every year to work in these shelters. We've actually slept on the floor at a lot of these shelters, sitting on just on a mat, nothing else. You know, and I will say that, yes, there is a problem with homelessness in this country, in this state, in this city. And I think that the country, state, and cities and towns have to do more to help the homeless. We sit there and talk about putting these pallet houses in these in a particular area here in Cranston, which I do not agree with, because it turns into a safety issue. And the safety issue one of the main safety issues is the residents of the homeless. You know, we've heard about fire and the rescue, the police going to Harrington Hall. We've heard about the overdoses that's happened. Now, if an overdose in those shelters, you have a person that works there overnight, stays up overnight, make sure maintenance is, everything is safe for the residents of that shelter. During these pallet houses, doors being shut, if an emergency happens to somebody or somebody has an overdose, they're not going to find these people until the morning, unfortunately. And it's going to be too late to save their lives. We as humans need to help other humans. This is not a burden on people itself. This is a burden. Yeah, it is a financial burden because yes, we have to have more rescue. We have to have more fire. We have to have more police respond to these locations, unfortunately. But Cranston cannot be the only ones hosting this. You hear Providence talking about, oh, the Superman building, we're going to build housing in there. But each housing is going to be $2,000 to $3,000. Not for nothing, but we have to work on our homelessness before we talk about luxury housing. You know, I know the cities of Pawtucket and Central Falls, they have shelters set up in place. They've converted part of an old hospital in Pawtucket for homeless shelters. We need to have permanent housing or shelters for these people. But I don't think Cranston should be dropped with the complete burden, the financial burden that this will cause. Thank you for your time. Have a great night.
Thank you.
I see no additional public comment. If the chair can remind the public that they need to raise their hand in order to be heard.
Hi, if you're on Zoom, because I think I see several people on Zoom, but if anyone has public comment, they need to raise their hand with the Zoom function.
Count name Tricia.
Hi, this is Trisha Gilmore. I live in Cranston. I live at 4 Peppermill Lane. I've lived in the city of Cranston for just about 20 years with my husband and our sons. I just wanted to have a minute to speak based on my previous history working with the community about this issue specifically at Harrington Hall. I was involved many years ago when it seemed like the homeless population of sex offenders was getting a little bit out of control. So, you know, unlike some of the people that are speaking against this resolution, I would like to say I fully support this resolution. I'm also very thankful to our Cranston leaders who are keeping an eye out and making the residents aware and working on our behalf because they truly know what this represents. Having insight, as I had for many years, to this specific situation, I don't have the luxury of having a fantasy land idea of what exists there. This is not about homelessness. This is about homeless sex offenders. This is about homeless criminals. This is about, for the most part, people who cannot be rehabilitated based on the type of crime. Statistics and data proves that. Anyone who's involved with this community should be well aware of that. We've had many issues over the years, one of which is a lot of these people are able to dispute the level that's assigned to them when they're coming out of court. And I believe it still stands that if their level is disputed, it doesn't go on record. And so they may or may not be monitored. People are talking about the services that they would be able to use, which would be great, except the majority of them don't utilize the services except for the free bus pass that they use as a way to get to Providence, get what they need, and come back to Cranston. It is very well known that they are a major burden on our police, fire, and rescue. And I am repeating that because I think for the people who are being very idealistic about this, I think it's important for them to really understand that this is a burden that Cranston already bears. We don't see any tax decreases for it. We don't get any benefit. This is not about helping human lives. This is about a city that has already done its fair share, and this is a safety issue. If you really want to understand that shelter, you need to understand that families, women, children, they won't use that shelter because it's not safe to be there. So I just wanted to say thank you to our Cranston leaders for looking out for us. I fully support this resolution. And if there's anything else from the public that you need, please let us know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If there's anyone else on Zoom who would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Carolyn Medeiros.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My name is Carolyn Medeiros. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Safe Communities. I believe the City Council is familiar with me and my organization. We're a statewide nonprofit. We do victim advocacy for victims of violent crime and lobby some of the most serious crime bills in the state that have been passed into law. I have worked in the past with the city of Cranston, Harrington Hall, and I have a question that I haven't seen brought up or answered in any way. Will these pop-up houses be under the same guidelines as a shelter? We passed a resolution in Cranston and then on to a state law that a shelter would have to mandatorily notify police within 24 hours when they had a sex offender join that shelter. So would these pop-up houses fall under that or not? And that's a serious question that needs a serious answer. Also, mixed use of the pop-up houses, I would be concerned if you have females, single, in these pop-up houses and other pop-up houses with males or sex offenders in the same residence area. I did extensive research for the city of Cranston on the cost on police, fire, rescue at the time with Harrington Hall. So I already know, and I think we all know, that Cranston is heavily overburdened with picking up the cost for these kind of facilities and services. It's a burden that the taxpayers of Cranston simply don't deserve to have, like they've been doing right along. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anyone
Stephanie
else,
Paul.
no? Hi, Stephanie, go ahead. If you could give us your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Hi, Stephanie, can you hear me?
Does the chair want me to move on to the next one, or? It is not a phone number.
Okay, Stephanie, we're going to move to the next person. I'd love to have you speak. If you want to stay on and just put your hand down, put it back up, then we'll call on you again.
Drake Patton.
Good evening, Drake Patton, 684 Natick Avenue, Cranston. I really appreciate the voices tonight from the community, and it makes me value so much living here, which I do. But as an anthropologist, which I am, what I fear we're into is a lot of different issues on the table all at once. And by that, I mean, people have said tonight, this is a state issue. I agree with that. But it is also our issue, meaning as people, as a community, as neighbors, caring for one another. Historically, that's what made this nation pretty great at one time. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers. So that's one piece of tonight. And then there are questions that have been raised by various folks with professional and personal connections to this issue. They're asking, well, what are the details? And I think we don't know what those details are. So we need to know that, right? To make a decision, we need to actually know all of the answers to those questions. And I'm not so sure that Cranston has borne more than others around homelessness. And if we have, then shouldn't we be approaching the state and actually working on that as an issue? Isn't that a place that our city council might direct energy? So I really value what people have said tonight, but I'm left with more questions than I started out the evening with. And I think perhaps the best way that we as a community move forward is to ask those questions more deeply and explore them. Because the reality is, as a city, we are not addressing the cost of housing, which means we're going to contribute to homelessness over time more than we already have. And we haven't addressed the fact that we have unhoused people in our community appropriately. And we can't blame that on the state. So we have a problem. And tonight, we have had folks with incredible experience in this area who are saying, we're willing to help. I think a lot of people are willing to help. So couldn't we reframe this into something where we say, this is a problem that we as a community, Cranston, this important city in Rhode Island, we want to actually answer this, not just shut it down. And the last thing I would say is, let's not conflate sexual offenders with homeless people, because that's not correct. And we need to be very careful about that. And I want to thank everybody, as always, for all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Drake. Is there anyone else on Zoom?
I see no public comment at this time.
Okay, if there's no public comment on Zoom, I'll ask one more time with the audience before me. I see no public
We
comment.
do
I-
have one additional member of the public on Zoom, Catherine Trimber.
Catherine, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you please give us your full name and your address?
Yes, my name is Catherine Trimber. My address is 60 Sefton Drive in Cranston. And everyone actually heard my husband speak a little bit earlier. So I just wanted to add really quickly, I also am a primary care doctor and have the privilege of taking care of people who are experiencing homelessness, substance use. I take care of a lot of people who have been at the ACI. And so, as my husband explained, I know many of the folks that have similar experiences and are going through the really tough times that that we're sort of speaking about. And I think what I wanted to just add to this is that I think it's not just a question of whether we should allow this to happen in Cranston. I've lived in Cranston my whole life. I moved back to Cranston after moving away to raise my kids here. And I think as a Cranstonian that we should actually welcome this. And as the previous speaker said, really sort of rise up to the challenge. Many people say that we should judge a society by how we care for the most marginalized. The Statue of Liberty says that we send me your poor, send me your weary. And I think that in Cranston, we should step up to this challenge and actually take on the role of bringing dignity back to the lives of people who are really suffering. And as many of us who work with this community have said, we are here, we are ready to care for folks, we are ready to team up with the city. We just need a place for our patients and our friends and neighbors to rest their head at night. I'll keep seeing the patients. I'll keep caring for them alongside these amazing folks who are working with the social service agencies. We just need a place for people to put their head at night. And I think that Cranston is up to this challenge. And I think that we can be an example both for other cities, but also for our children and show them how we take care of our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
See no additional public comment.
Okay, if there's no one else who would like to speak, I will close public comments. Thank you all for your comments, and I will open up conversation for the council. Councilman Donegan?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman. Through the chair to Director Moretti. Thank you, sir. So based on the preliminary conversations, is there any plan that you know of to move forward with this?
No, as I indicated, to capsulize it, it was an inquiry asking the administration's opinion, both personally how the mayor felt and then his perception as to what elected officials and the residents would feel. Would there be resistance or what have you to a concept of probably proposing in the vicinity of 30 to 40 of these pallet houses. They could be single units or double units, occupancy units, but no firm proposal. And it was left that they were considering Cranston amongst other communities, and they would get back to us. So it was open looped, if you will. It was not a closed loop discussion. It was, they received that input, and I pretty much expressed the administration's sentiments earlier. But really, just to put in perspective, aside from the, I don't want, and I think the audience mentioned some good points, the responsibility rather than the word burden that it has on the city. But the mayor's failing is that Cranston already has absorbed approximately 125 homeless individuals already. This would add a number that's going to be increasing it to perhaps about 160, 170. Perhaps the state could be looking into other communities. There's 38 other cities and towns. And as we saw from the numbers that were presented this evening, there's about 425 homeless people, I think we heard this evening. It's perhaps other communities could share that responsibility and not just overburdening Cranston. And that was pretty much what the message was. But to specifically answer your question, no, there was not a specific proposal. It was left that they'll take that feedback to be considered.
And to the best of our knowledge, they're not moving forward with Cranston as a location.
The Director Saul, nor the administration formally got back to us. We did hear on the radio in an interview that the governor indicated that he would not move forward. He felt that Cranston already is doing its fair share, I think it was, and mentioning that he would not move forward without the mayor's agreement.
Thank you, Director. I'm not on the committee. I don't have a vote tonight. If I were voting this evening, I would vote no on the resolution. There are, well, just to the issue. Within our charter, we have the duty to uphold the safety, health, and well-being of the city of Cranston, and people that are unhoused fall under that category. And whether or not they're living off the old railroad tracks behind Lincoln Avenue, or under the bridge on Niantic, or under Route 10, they're already here in Cranston. Kids Count, as I've talked about in the past, has identified 72 children. I'm sorry, 30 now? 30. That was last year, so good. That's good that it's gone down. Still, 30 children within Cranston Public Schools that are unhoused. So they're already here, whether they're living under a bridge in Cranston or they're in a shelter, a shelter that would keep them warm and dry in the winter in New England. They're already here in Cranston. Now, there are issues regarding the specifics of this that need to be flushed out, discussed, workshopped, however, whatever we want to call it. That's legitimate. Those are legitimate questions that need to be addressed if anything were to move forward. But I just think that some of the language regarding this, conflating homelessness and sex offenders and drug addicts, I think is a dangerous, I think it's dangerous language to use, given that we know how many people, are homeless or unhoused because of mental illness, because of the material conditions that we know economically, people have fallen into homelessness. Cranston, for the past decade, has done almost nothing to address affordable housing. We're at half of what we're supposed to be in terms of permanent LMI housing in the city. We're not building more housing. People are like almost half of the renters in the city are cost burdened. Almost a third of homeowners in the city are cost burdened. The economic reality is that many people are a paycheck away from falling into homelessness, or a medical emergency away from falling into homelessness, or some sort of life event from falling into homelessness. So they're already here in Cranston. And yes, we need to do more. It is our responsibility to take care of those people because they're Cranston residents. They live here, they work here, they go to school here. They are members of our community. And as Reverend Klinker said, I mean, it is our responsibility. So I don't disagree that there are questions that need to be answered, but I just think that the way some of this has gone about is just, I think it's dangerous, the language that's being used. So I would vote no.
Thank you, Councilman Donegan. Anyone else? Councilman Ferry?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So looks like there is no plan to do this. I always felt that that was probably the answer to that question. So we don't have to worry so much about all the sex offenders that are going to come storming into our city now. We as a city have contributed to this problem by doing nothing for the homeless people and not building affordable housing and not giving the people that are one paycheck away from homelessness a chance to make it in this society. I appreciate the fact that the police and fire have protected us every time they go there and stopped something from being a problem to me, because I live 1.2 miles from this spot. And I appreciate their help. But the fact that we have not done enough, we only do what we have to do on that facility in Harrington Hall. Harrington Hall is not a city thing, it's a state thing. We only go there because we have to go there. We only have those people on a city because we're forced to have them there. Shame on us for not doing more and creating this problem and then wanting to do nothing about it. Thank you.
Councilman Campiano?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Well, let's understand homelessness is not a problem in Cranston. It's a worldwide problem. It's all over the world. And I listened to the stories that I heard here today on both sides, and it's heart-wrenching to hear families that are without homes, and I understand firsthand how difficult it is, how high rents are, and how you could be one paycheck away. But also understand that the people who do support this resolution, they're not bad people either. They have concerns. So there is both sides to this. You know, I vow that if I'm given the chance, I will do what I can to make more affordable housing here in Cranston, because it is a very, very important issue. But I don't think that this is the answer. I don't think putting these pallet houses up in this area is the answer. It's a larger problem that needs to be looked at, and hopefully I'm given the opportunity to help in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President?
Thank you, Chair. I took a lot of notes tonight and I can't read half of what I wrote down because I have terrible handwriting. But a couple of things I did write down and certainly agree with the sentiments of Council Member Campiano is the burden that the fire and police have going to the Pastore complex. And the payment in lieu of taxes doesn't cover all of those runs. My heart bleeds for the homeless, and we have to find a solution. But I do think pallet housing isn't the answer. I know there might not be plans now. We heard there was plans and there might not be plans, but there's an election coming too, and the plans could change after. I really think, having somewhere to live or stay that has a bathroom is really important, and a pallet housing doesn't have a bathroom. The fire chief was concerned about the flammability of the pallet housing. And then former Vice President Michael Favicchio came up and spoke. He mentioned families in the pallet housing near Harrington Hall or in field adjacent to it. That's an issue too. So I will vote for this resolution tonight. I hope it does force the governor to maybe pump the brakes if this is gonna come up or come to Cranston. I think we can do better. I do really think pallet housing isn't the solution and that better housing should be out there and be affordable. So I'll be voting for the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Councilman Donegan?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I don't think anyone is saying, I don't think that anyone that votes against this is inherently a bad person, or anyone that votes for this is inherently a bad person, nor that anyone that supports this do I think is inherently a bad person. We can all have disagreements on policy without, thinking everyone is evil, or a boogeyman or whatnot. So I want to be clear about that. Is pallet housing a permanent solution? No. But when we talk about, well, they wouldn't have a bathroom, or it might be a tight space, but what's the alternative? I mean, that sounds a lot better than living under a bridge or living in the woods. It is going to be winter in New England. The alternative is that they'd be living outside. There aren't enough beds. So when we talk about alternatives, unless there's going to be a bunch of housing that's put up, where are they going to live? This is the United States of America. We have people, veterans, people from all sorts of economic class living under bridges, in the back of alleys, in the woods. It's going to be winter in New England in a month. The alternative is that they're going to be living outside. Then what are we going to do? We might not be getting a call to Harrington Hall or to that complex, but we may be getting a call to someone freezing to death. So what's the alternative? Seriously, what is the alternative if we don't do anything? I'm sorry, what is it? Go somewhere else, freeze to death in another city? What is the alternative?
Anyone else? Councilwoman Vargas?
Thank you. I also have a lot of notes down. I'm just trying to make sure them in a very organized way as I'm delivering. So one of my first questions is, earlier in the conversation through the chair to the administration, I think they would not receiving funding from the state in terms of our police and fire going or assisting calls that are coming in the runs. Can you just direct them already? Do we not receive funds for these runs that were noted this evening?
I checked on the pilot money, payment in lieu of taxes, for those people who don't know what the acronym is. There's about $4.7 million the city
Correct.
receives. It's not based, we do not receive any money for any of our police or fire safety support. That's purely on the city. It's based on real estate values. And so Cranston does bear the responsibility of accommodating the state facilities. As to the message received from the governor's office and Director Saul was the governor was working on a plan for those homeless people, not to have those people on the streets and in our community that are found not housed. He wants to house these people. But the question is, how many should Cranston absorb? Because he is also considering other communities.
So
in other words, it's a matter of how much should Cranston bear because he's trying to make provisions for the people not to leave them on the street. So it's not Cranston's.
So I guess my
responsibility.
question to piggyback off of that is that, yes, we have a revenue of $4.76 million under pilot for this fiscal year, right? That's in our budget. And the funds that are coming in are not for, or I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear, are for services of which we are providing to, or they're not?
Cranston receives zero
Okay.
zero consideration for those services. It's based, that pilot is because the real estate that's lost,
It's a
real estate
part of
taxes
the
that are
tax.
lost as a result of the state having those facilities.
Okay, so there's, and so those taxes that they're paying is for the land that's in our city, but pretty much also for the services that we're,
Not for the service.
but it's not services. Okay, so, so then my question is on that, on the resolution that's being introduced this evening is that, there is a section on here, that I believe references payment structure on line 80. And so, you know, I'm gonna first and foremost just pretty much straight up say that I don't support this resolution. And I feel that in this resolution, there are too many items in under one resolutions that perhaps could be split. So if payment, for example, is one big issue, where if we are providing our police and our fire department responding to calls, then perhaps that is part, if it wasn't already, part of the conversation that the governor's office and the director of housing had with the administration in terms of possible payment structure. I do believe that if we do happen to have the pallet temporary shelters in the state property that's located within the city, then we should be able to have some sort of compensation or reimbursements on that. That's my first opinion on that. However, on the permanent housing that's noted on this resolution on line 23, I don't believe this is permanent housing. This is considered a temporary housing for the winter. So I don't agree with that verbiage on there either. That's on here. And then I also don't agree, as it seems like we're comparing all of our homeless community members to sexual offenders, when in fact there are some homeless families, again, who have children that are in our school department. There are families that are homeless, going through homelessness because they are either victims of a domestic violence, including even some veterans. So I'm not sure if I'm misreading this incorrectly, but I just wanted to make sure that the way I have interpreted, I just don't want to compare. I don't think every person who's homeless necessarily is considered or should be considered a registered sex offender in our city. The other item that I had on here as well was there was a conversation, I think, noted by the director of housing that there was a meeting in October, I think that just a few weeks ago, October 5th, I think it was the date that I saw on there. So the shelter is going, the pallets, I believe, is a conversation that is not only happening in Cranston, but I believe and direct through the chair, through the administration, if you can correct me, if this was a conversation that was had with the governor's office or whomever it was, a representative from his office or housing, is that they're seeking not just Cranston, but other state parcels that are owned by the state, right? State parcel, so that they can also place the shelters on there, the temporary ones, because this is a concern here in Cranston because it's in our land, but they're hoping to make sure that the pallets are going to be spread and that there is some sort of conversation amongst municipalities. So that way once they identify state land, they can potentially put those shelters, temporary shelters in those locations. So it's not just Cranston, correct?
I can express it the way they expressed it. They expressed it that they did not say temporary. They did say pallet shelters, pallet housing. They did not infer temporary. I took it as permanent, frankly, or rotational in terms of maybe getting some in and helping people out, getting there on their feet and moving on. But I did not get the impression that they said temporary, nor did I hear that. In terms of other communities, yes, not necessarily they're looking for state land in other communities. They just made mention that they are looking to other communities as well as Cranston. So not necessarily state property owned facilities. I don't know what else they may look into, but it wasn't necessarily state owned property. They weren't that specific to say.
And in your conversation, was there any conversations at all in terms of, there were some questions that were being posed this evening in terms of, whether they will have electricity, whether they will have, whether they will be regulated by the state, or will the state take liability in terms of making sure that it's, that's the state's inspection who is going to be checking that the shelters are fine? Is there an application process, or will there be resources available? Was any of those conversations taken in terms of how the setup of?
Yeah. Yes, not referring to that, I said that specific, it was more global in discussion about impact. Though they did say that should they proceed, as we voice our concerns, they said they would have to address our concerns. But there really wasn't any specifics associated, nor specifics of the actual structures themselves. They just demonstrated an outside look at several pallet houses that were located elsewhere, I believe out of state, but they did not specifically refer to any amenities, if you'll say, or necessities. They didn't indicate that.
And so what is the follow-up that you are having with the housing director or the governor's office or any other coalitions perhaps that are part of these conversations?
Yeah, it was the members of the governor's office and Director Sal's, him and another staff member. They did not close the loop. They left it open to say, we'll get back to you. I asked the timing, they said implementation December, so probably a few weeks away from now. So if it were to happen, I'm not sure how much notification and discussion that there would be. They might just present it. I don't know that.
So you're not sure when the next conversation is going to happen?
They did not tell us if and when they're going to get back to us.
Okay. As we
They
heard
were
from,
very cordial, very nice. They want to note that.
well, and so I would assume that the mayor would probably reach out to get a sense as to when this is happening.
It's in the state's court, not court, but court, to volley back to us. That's how it was left. The mayor was not seeking it, and it's, if Cranston is to be considered, the state would get back, would notify us what their plans are. That's how it was left.
Okay.
Does the mayor, I don't know if the mayor feels he should be making phone calls. I don't know if we're gonna just get answers. I think that the agency will get to the state once they will get to the city once they make their decision.
I would assume that the state, and if this is moving along with the temporary pallet shelters that are probably being built or will be built, I would assume that they're going to be going through some sort of safety process and protocol on the state side.
I would
And
only think so, though it wasn't discussed.
All right. So the other thing that was obviously noted was that, yes, winter is quickly approaching. We've been fortunate to have nice weather till this day. But we also have a housing commission in the city. And, this is, we need to make sure that our housing commissions are very involved to make sure that we do have affordable housing with the cost of living going up, increasing day by day. People can't afford to even buy homes, let alone the, Federal Reserve increasing interest rates again today. So I just feel that the way there's so many questions that are unanswered and so I am not voting on this resolution in favor of this resolution. But as a city and as a city council, we heard a lot about workshops. We heard about how many social workers are possibly should be rotating or going right around the facilities. It's a human right. Everybody deserves housing, and it is not about, when you go to your house tonight and it's say falls to 40 degrees and you have your heat on, think of so many other folks who don't have a roof over their head or don't have heat tonight at all. And, whether it is an option for the person to decide whether or not they want to go into a crossroad facility, if you will, or not. There's also, they're very limited into the capacity as well. So there's people we have children who are homeless in our school department that we don't know of, and we shouldn't be placing this in this category. Whether or not there will be children living in shelters or not, pallet shelters, I don't know the answer to that. But I can say that as council members and as a city, we should really try to continue to have these hard conversations. And I understand that, no people want to walk in Brayton Park without, making assumptions that something may happen. But at the same time, having these shelters also in an actual location will also avoid, having folks from living in possibly in tents and have warmer weather. Have a warmer place to lay their heads at and that at night. And so, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record on my end, but these are structures that are temporary. They're not permanent from what I'm hearing from other coalitions. And so I want to make sure that we have a high cost of living in our country, in our state, particularly here in our city. And we want to make sure that we help out everyone who's in the homeless community. And I don't want to refer to the folks that are homeless as these people, because I also find that to be very offensive to say these people, whereas we should probably refer them to the homeless community and make sure that, and I know that some of them are veterans and survivors of domestic violence and elderly and folks with disability. So as council members, perhaps we, whether this passes this evening or not, continue to make sure that we also have a conversation. The administration has a conversation also with the governor's office, with the housing director, and see what we can actually do to try to make sure that we have and we provide Cranston folks or folks that are coming into Cranston or work with other municipalities to make sure that this huge crisis that we're having is not going to be fixed from one night to the next, but that we actually are working and see what we can do with even the housing commission that we have. What's the point of having a commission if we're not moving forward with anything? So I think we should all be working together. And I know that they are, but it's going to take a long time. But I just don't support this resolution this evening at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Riley.
Thank you, Chair. So again, I just wanted to reiterate, this has nothing to do with the homeless, with homeless policy. This is simply, I'm calling for the city of Cranston to stop enabling the state of Rhode Island and for the state of Rhode Island to actually come through with something that isn't short-sighted, that isn't last minute, and maybe, just maybe, with some common sense, actually helps a few people. So if we keep allowing them to just use that state facility with all that acreage that other cities and towns don't have, and the 4.7 million we get for that amount of acreage is a joke, but that's a discussion for another day. So we already house, I believe one of the numbers is 112 men Then another number, 426 people are sleeping in the streets. That's unacceptable. Imagine if just 4 of the 38 other remaining cities or towns did what Cranston already did. We wouldn't have this problem, would we? So no, I won't feel shamed. I won't be told I don't have compassion. And just because I'm the one bringing it up, that the state continues to just intensify their use of the Pastori Center with whatever they want. I was a little surprised at some of the, what the administration had to say, because some of the conversations the mayor and I have personally had, and also Director Moretti, I think one of the quotes was, "I'll be surprised if it doesn't go there." And that was probably within about 48 hours. So I understand, politics is politics, and there are relationships and there are cameras in this room. Everybody wants to play nice. But you know what? I represent Ward 6. That's what this is. I represent all those people who go to the library and have to deal with this. So it's a pervasive problem. I would love to live in a state where we had a housing czar that actually put plans in place a month, a year, and enacted those plans. Not every single late October or November, the call comes in, "Oh, we didn't do anything again. We're going to throw it at you." Well, that's not going to happen, because I'm here and I'm standing up and I'm actually saying no. And I'm not going to play kissy face with the other politicians. What's wrong is wrong. Cranston does enough. And I'm glad I live in a city that does help and does do something. But I will not play the violin game, because we do more than we should. And other cities and towns have to step up. Like I said, if just 4 did what Cranston already does, there wouldn't be a problem. So the time for conversations and workshops, I'm sorry, everybody. And it was said that we're early in the process. Early. A number of people said we're early in the process. Do I need to get a calendar out? It is November 3rd. Okay. This isn't early. That is just more deflecting, minimizing, pushing the people away that have concerns and questions so that they can do what they do year after year. Put it at the NILO, put it in the Pastori Center. But the reason I brought this forward is because we're not just going to be their dumping ground. We're not just going to, kiss up to the top politicians in the state. We're going to stand up for the people for once. So with that, as far as, excuse me, I have a lot of notes as well that I can barely read, but the bottom line is we do enough. We share the responsibilities of that, police, fire, socially. Whenever we go to a stop sign or a red light, we have to deal with that responsibility. And all I'm asking is maybe Cumberland can do it. Maybe East Greenwich can do it. We already do it. So when all the other cities and towns get around to doing what we do, then call us and I will be the first one to help. And that I support this resolution. It's time to stop minimizing, apologizing for other politicians' actions and stand up for the people of Cranston. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak before? I would like to speak before we're done. So Councilwoman Vargas.
Yeah. Councilman Member Riley, I agree. Cranston should not be the only city that is identified only because we have the state parcel land here in Cranston. I agree. The state is not just Cranston, right? We have, we have what, about 1 million folks here in the state. We have 39 municipalities. Absolutely. Other areas should be identified as well. However, these should be conversations that should be had with other cities and towns. But as a start, if this, given the fact that it's getting colder and colder, and they've identified this property, the property here as a start, then, I get your pushback on it, and you don't want Cranston to be have the burden every year during this time. But it's a week or two. And so perhaps I think they're saying there was only about 200 or so, or 100 or so shelters that they were considering building. But and there's 429 people, as you said, that don't have, that they said tonight that they don't have bed tonight. So I do agree, perhaps the 100 or so, whatever amount of shelters that they need to place in that campus, particularly should go up. I'm thinking of even the children, or, and folks that are being very cold, but with all due respect to the Cranston Police Department and the Cranston Fire Department, I know that it's financially for us, it could be expensive on that, but what else have we done, or what else can we do for the homeless community? Other than the runs that the Cranston Police Department and the Cranston Fire Department has done. I'm gonna say, I think we all have that responsibility to say that we should all be coming together and trying to figure out what else we can do. But time is of the essence, and I believe everybody should have a place to lay their head on again. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, I think Councilman Campiano, you want to respond?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Just one. If it wasn't stated, the mayor supports Councilman Riley's resolution, just to make it clear. It is to clarify, and because it's still a open looped discussion. And the concern would be is if one day the state would have the right just to come in, because they don't require any change in zoning laws or anything, to do what they want to do, basically. That's what I'm told from our solicitors. So the mayor does support the councilman's resolution for all the reasons we talked about. It's not just a firm, slap. It's for all the good reasons discussed. And I can say this is probably the most civil council meeting I've had, with wonderful people talking from their hearts. And in that same vein, that compassion is there from the mayor, but ultimately he owes responsibility to 82,000 citizens of the city. And he is in support of Councilman Riley's resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Campiano.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Well, those who know me know that I'm a glass half full person. I take pride in finding the silver lining in the darkest cloud. And by this resolution coming forward, the conversations have started. And hopefully by this coming forward, we make a difference in the future. So thank you, Councilman, for bringing this forward and starting the conversation, and hopefully something comes of it. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councilman Donegan. All right, Councilman Donegan is the last. I want to talk.
Thank you. So we have identified that there are unhoused people in Cranston. If we're not going to put them into even temporary housing, what are we going to do? And if we're not going to put them into temporary housing, is the administration going to use any of the ARPA funds to help put them into housing? What is the plan?
I'd have to defer to the attorneys to see if this is sticking to the dock. I'd be happy to answer the question.
I'll be more strict to the docket. The city of Cranston has done nothing to put unhoused people into housing. Harrington Hall is a state facility. The city of Cranston, now we might handle safety calls and all that, absolutely. But the city of Cranston as an entity has done nothing to put people into housing.
And through the chair, that is a state issue with millions, $250 million, with $250 million given to the state. So if the McKee administration has failed, then they can give us the money if Mr. Donegan wants to help the homeless in Cranston.
Okay. So this can go in multiple directions, and I'm a supporter of this resolution and signed on to this resolution because I firmly believe that the state of Rhode Island is not doing their job. The state of Rhode Island has a housing czar. That's someone's title. They make $170,000 a year. And they have various councils underneath them. And then we have various nonprofit that focus on the homeless, that share with the governor and the housing czar their opinion on what they should be doing. In May, the professor from Providence College, find his name, I believe it's Eric Hirsch, maybe, perhaps, suggested to Governor McKee that we put 500 pallet shelters at the Pastore Center in May. Now, I can tell you that if in May, someone had some sort of plan around this and came to the city of Cranston and engaged the various organizations we have in this city that help the homeless and the Housing Commission and the mayor and the city council and safety services, then maybe we could have helped them come up with a plan before the end of October and November, because I know there was already frost on the ground before they had a conversation. So it's not that no one wants to help the homeless. It's that this is poor planning and now we have to pay for it, because frankly, I know I look bad right now. Like, I don't care about homeless people, but I do. But I care about wraparound services and that people actually get help, because when people leave Harrington Hall at 7 a.m. and wander around Cranston, they're not getting help. They're not being helped to get a job. They're not getting services. So why are we going to cage people in boxes that are just a little bit bigger than prison cells and pretend that we're really housing people? And then everyone looks around and says that we're bad and we're not helping. If the state of Rhode Island wants to take some of that $250 million and give it to us to house the 30 kids in Cranston and their families, then I'm sure we could come up with a plan to do that ourselves. And I'm sure we would do it before October, or at least like to think we would, or we'd be held accountable by each other. So that's not what this is about. So let's not pretend that this is actually solving a problem. And let's not pretend that bridge or temporary housing leads to a significant amount of permanent housing for the homeless, because it doesn't. So we have a lot of money and someone needs to do their job. And this is our job right here to have this conversation. And I can tell you that if this didn't come forward, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And that all the people that came in here tonight who are professionals, that I didn't know them, and now I'm going to call them. So that's how this works. Sometimes you have to say no in order for someone to come back and say, well, oh, I worked on this and here's some actual plans, because we have no plans. It was just a suggestion. But if you just say, okay, then they can do whatever they want. That's how it works. So if anyone wants to pretend that that's not how it works, then you're being disingenuous. Thank you. And to clarify on the motion, it is to approve this resolution. And I will call for a roll. And like all resolutions, this would go to the full council. Thank you.
Councilwoman Mazzulli,
Yes.
Councilman Riley,
Yes.
Councilwoman Vargas,
No.
Councilman Campiano,
Yes.
Council Vice President Ferry,
No.
Council President Paplaskas.
Yes.
Okay, I think we have no further business, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Yes. Yes, please do, Attorney.
I know it's been a long night, so thank you for your indulgence. I've sat next to a 39-year-old man now for the better part of 2 years, who has recognized everybody's birthday, holiday, and anniversary. And tomorrow, the council president turns 40.
Woo! And happy birthday, Council President Paplaskas.
Thank you. And thanks for calling me out, Solicitor Angel.
And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? You are dismissed.